of the victim. And the way you look at you is in that
And that question hangs in the air because it cuts straight to the heart of what so many Americans are feeling right now, that the behavior they are witnessing is not just erratic, but unmoored from reality, decoupled from the material suffering of the country, and drenched in a kind of grotesque decadence that feels almost deliberately provocative. When people see footage out of Mar-a-Lago of masked guests dressed as dogs, prancing around in a surreal, carnival-like spectacle, it's impossible not to feel the cognitive dissonance. On one side of the screen, you have images of armored ICE and Border Patrol agents flooding Minneapolis and St. Paul, firing flashbangs into crowds, spraying pepper spray, deploying noxious chemical agents against civilians.
Yeah, Julie, I appreciate you asking that. We are doing okay, but these are the tear gas canisters that law enforcement and those federal agents are deploying to try to disperse the crowds. This is what we were hit with.
On the other, you have Donald Trump hosting what looks like a dystopian masquerade, surrounded by excess, insulation, and a total absence of empathy. The symbolism is almost too on the nose. It evokes the phrase, "let them eat cake," except in this case, it's more like let them eat dog food, let them choke on gas, let them fend for themselves while the elite dance in masks. And this isn't happening in a vacuum. Americans are being crushed economically. Foreclosures are climbing to levels not seen since the Great Recession. Rent is unaffordable in city after city. Grocery prices continue to outpace wages. Millions of people are living one missed paycheck away from catastrophe, under constant psychological stress, trying to hold together families, jobs, and basic dignity. Against that backdrop,
Donald Trump has ordered his Special Forces chiefs to draw up plans to invade Greenland, reports say. Feeling emboldened by the stunning capture of Venezuelan tyrant Nicolas Maduro, Trump's team are increasingly worried that Russia or China may seize the strategically critical island before they do, according to White House sources.
Trump is threatening to invade Greenland, forcing the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland to travel to Washington, only to be told bluntly by J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio that the United States has no intention of backing down. The message wasn't diplomatic, it was imperial. We want it, and we're prepared to take it. The consequences of that rhetoric are already unfolding. France, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, Canada, and other allies are now sending special forces to Greenland, conducting joint military exercises not to deter Russia or China, but to prepare for the unthinkable possibility of U.S. aggression.
NATO has not confirmed its approval of the drills, which reportedly involve troops from Sweden, Germany, France, the Netherlands and Canada. Hosts Denmark framed it as part of a bolstering of Greenland's defences.
Let that sink in. Former allies are coordinating defenses against the United States. This is the world Trump has created. And while that geopolitical earthquake is rumbling beneath our feet, he's throwing a masked party at Mar-a-Lago like a bored Roman emperor. The grotesqueness doesn't stop there. In Detroit, where Trump made a highly publicized appearance, reports from Ford workers paint an equally disturbing picture. Not only did Trump reportedly give the middle finger and shout "F you" at a union worker who called him out as a pedophile protector, but multiple independent accounts describe his body odor as overwhelming, nauseating, and unforgettable.
Well, it is the candid moment caught on camera during President Trump's visit to the Ford Rouge plant in Dearborn yesterday. A worker caught heckling the president, and President Trump firing back right away with a middle finger. The video is now blowing up online, and the man who heckled him is being flooded with donations.
Workers are allegedly talking about it more than they're talking about the outburst itself. Descriptions range from rancid breath to something far worse, a physical manifestation of decay that people say lingered in the air. It's a detail that might sound trivial, even crude, but it has taken on symbolic weight. When people talk about rot at the top, they are no longer speaking metaphorically. The response from the United Auto Workers was immediate and telling. They made it clear that no one, not even a president, gets to harass or intimidate union workers.
Are you able to talk with me a little bit about what options are on the table right now?
No real options right now. We're still just having discussions in regards to making sure that we represent TJ as a member fully.
Dickerson explained that the UAW is walking a fine line. The union is there to represent its workers.
The worker who spoke up was saying something many Americans believe to be true, that Trump has repeatedly shielded powerful figures implicated in child sex trafficking, that the Department of Justice has become a racketeering operation designed to bury the Epstein files rather than expose them. When the truth gets you suspended and the lie gets protected, the system is upside down. And while all of this is happening, Trump is posting on social media with the same venomous projection he's always used. He claims Minneapolis has no food, no cleanliness, no service, nothing but fraud. Every accusation is a confession. Cleanliness, that's not what people are reporting about him. Fraud, that word follows him everywhere, through courts, settlements, bankruptcies, and grifts. Service, his administration has hollowed out public institutions, leaving Americans to fend for themselves. Then he escalates, suggesting people should be sent back to Somalia or any other country from where they came, lumping together entire states as a giant Democrat scam. It's racist, it's authoritarian, and it's designed to dehumanize at a time when federal force is already being deployed against civilians. Meanwhile, the international fallout continues to grow. Only 4% of Americans support taking Greenland by force, yet Trump barrels ahead, indifferent to public opinion, indifferent to alliances, indifferent to the risk of global destabilization. At the same time, reporting reveals that Venezuelan oil revenues are being routed through bank accounts in Qatar. The explanation offered is that Qatar is a neutral location where money can flow freely. Flow freely to where? To whom? As Pablo Monriquez pointed out, it raises an obvious question. If American banks aren't good enough, what exactly is being hidden? The stench of grift is everywhere, and it's not subtle. Trump then adds another layer of chaos by praising Delcy Rodriguez, an authoritarian figure tied to Venezuela's repression, posting that he admires her strength and leadership. Tell that to the pro-democracy activists in Venezuela, whose hopes are being crushed, whose protests have been met with bullets and mass arrests. Tell that to the families of those disappeared or killed. Trump's admiration for strongmen is consistent, and it always comes at the expense of ordinary people. At the same time, Iran is boiling. Trump publicly encouraged protesters, promised them support, and threatened consequences if even one was killed. Days later, reports suggest thousands, possibly tens of thousands, may have been massacred by the regime. Iranian airspace has gone eerily quiet as the world waits to see if Trump will follow through on his threats of swift, decisive military action. He insists he doesn't want a prolonged conflict, that if he can't wipe out the Ayatollah in one strike, he won't act at all. It's the logic of someone who sees geopolitics as a video game, unaware or uninterested in the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan, the disasters born of simplistic thinking and overconfidence. This is the pattern that keeps repeating. Grandiose threats, theatrical cruelty, reckless promises, followed by either catastrophic action or paralyzing inaction. And through it all, spectacle replaces substance. Dog masks at Mar-a-Lago, middle fingers in Detroit, gas in Minneapolis, military posturing abroad, economic despair at home. It all blends into a single unsettling portrait of a country being governed not by principle or policy, but by impulse, grievance, and performance. The question is no longer whether this is normal. It clearly isn't. The question is how much more damage can be done before the consequences become irreversible. Because history shows that when leaders retreat into decadence while the public suffers, when force replaces consent and spectacle replaces accountability, the end is never quiet. It's messy, destabilizing, and painful for the people who never asked for any of this in the first place. And what makes this moment especially dangerous is that the chaos is no longer episodic, it's systemic. There is no single scandal to isolate, no single outrageous incident to explain away. Instead, everything is happening at once, bleeding together into a constant state of instability that exhausts people emotionally and clouds their ability to process just how abnormal all of this truly is. That exhaustion is not accidental. It is the environment in which authoritarian behavior thrives, because when people are overwhelmed, spectacle becomes a distraction and cruelty becomes background noise. The Mar-a-Lago scene is emblematic of that decay. It isn't just a bizarre party with dog masks. It's a symbol of total detachment from reality. While Americans are watching their savings evaporate, skipping meals, choosing between rent and medicine, the most powerful man in the country is hosting a grotesque, almost mocking display of excess. It sends a clear message. Your suffering is irrelevant. Your fear is entertainment. Your pain is something to be laughed at behind gilded gates. That message lands even harder when paired with the images coming out of Minneapolis and St. Paul. People coughing, disoriented, eyes burning from gas, protesters running as flashbangs explode at their feet, families terrified, not because of crime, but because of the federal government showing up in militarized force. This is not about public safety. This is about intimidation. It is about reminding people who has the power and how easily it can be used against them. And yet, while that power is being flexed domestically, it is being squandered internationally. Allies no longer trust American leadership. They are no longer confident that U.S. actions are rooted in stability or shared values. The fact that European nations are coordinating defensive measures against the possibility of American aggression should be unthinkable. It would have sounded like satire a decade ago. Now it's being discussed in sober military briefings. That is how far things have deteriorated. At home, the economic picture continues to darken. Manufacturing jobs are disappearing. Entire communities are hollowing out again, reliving the trauma of past recessions while being told absurdly that everything is fine. People feel gaslit by official statements that don't match their lived experience. When leaders tell you the economy is booming, but your bank account tells you otherwise, trust erodes. And once trust is gone, the social fabric begins to tear. Trump's rhetoric accelerates that tear. His posts are designed not to inform, but to inflame. He doesn't talk about solutions, policy, or shared sacrifice. He talks about enemies. He talks about fraud, filth, and them. It's a classic tactic. Redirect anger away from those in power and toward marginalized groups, immigrants, cities, states, protesters, journalists, anyone but the people actually responsible for the suffering. Meanwhile, the grift continues quietly in the background. Money flowing through Qatar, deals obscured by layers of intermediaries, praise for authoritarian figures abroad, silence when protesters are slaughtered despite earlier promises of support. It's a pattern of saying whatever sounds strong in the moment, then doing whatever benefits Trump personally when the cameras move on. There is no coherent strategy, only self-interest dressed up as nationalism. And the psychological toll of all of this cannot be overstated. Living under constant uncertainty, watching norms collapse, seeing cruelty normalized wears people down. It creates a sense of unreality, like living inside a fever dream where nothing quite makes sense, but everything feels threatening. That's why images like the Mar-a-Lago dog masks resonate so deeply. They look like something out of dystopian fiction because that's what this moment feels like to millions of people. History teaches us that regimes often rot from the top before they collapse. Leaders retreat into fantasy, spectacle, and excess as reality becomes too inconvenient to confront. They surround themselves with loyalists, punish truth-tellers, and mock the suffering of ordinary people. They mistake fear for strength and confusion for control. But beneath that surface, legitimacy is eroding. Alliances are fracturing and resistance is quietly growing. The danger now is that the longer this continues, the higher the cost of recovery will be. Institutions weakened today take years to rebuild. Trust shattered today does not magically reappear tomorrow. Every act of cruelty, every lie, every grotesque display of indifference compounds the damage. And the people who pay the price are not the ones dancing in masks or posting from luxury estates. They are the ones breathing gas in the streets, counting pennies at the grocery store, worrying about rent, and wondering what kind of country they are leaving their children. So when people ask, what the hell is going on? The honest answer is that a system is being stress tested to its limits by leadership that treats governance as performance and power as a toy. The question is no longer whether this is sustainable. It clearly isn't. The question is how much more suffering will be inflicted before the breaking point is reached, and whether enough people will recognize the danger before the damage becomes irreversible. And this is where everything converges, because moments like this don't end with a neat resolution or a dramatic final scene. They end with consequences that unfold slowly and painfully, often after the people responsible have retreated back into comfort and denial. What we are living through right now is the normalization of dysfunction at the highest levels of power. And normalization is always the most dangerous phase. Once people start saying, well, that's just how things are now, the guardrails are already gone. The Mar-a-Lago spectacle, the crackdowns in American cities, the reckless foreign threats, the economic freefall, the grift, the cruelty, the indifference, all of it is connected by a single thread, a leadership culture that no longer feels bound by responsibility or accountability. Trump is not governing for the country. He is performing for himself and his most extreme followers, daring everyone else to look away or grow numb. The dog masks aren't just bizarre. They're a metaphor. They represent obedience, dehumanization, and mockery all at once, a grotesque parody of loyalty demanded without question. At the same time, the machinery of force is being normalized. Federal agents in the streets, chemical agents used on civilians, whistleblowers hunted, journalists raided, protesters branded as enemies. This is not about law and order. It is about power and fear. When a government begins treating its own people as a threat to be managed rather than citizens to be protected, it has crossed a fundamental line. Internationally, the damage may be even harder to undo. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. Allies who now train to defend against the United States will remember this era long after the individuals involved are gone. The world is adjusting to a version of America that is unpredictable, aggressive, and self-interested in the most naked way possible. That shift will not reverse overnight, and it will shape global politics for years, if not decades. Domestically, the economic pain will leave scars that statistics can't capture. Families displaced by foreclosure, workers burned out and demoralized, young people losing faith that hard work leads to stability. These are the conditions that breed long-term social instability, resentment, and despair. And instead of addressing those realities, the response from the top is mockery, projection, and blame. What makes this moment so unsettling is that it feels like a test of how much people will tolerate, a test of how far norms can be bent before they snap, a test of whether truth still matters in a landscape flooded with noise and spectacle. And tests like this don't come with warning labels. You only realize how far you've gone once you're already there. History doesn't usually announce itself while it's happening. It becomes clear later when people look back and ask how so many warning signs were ignored. The excess, the cruelty, the lies, the decay, the distractions, all of them were visible. All of them were documented. The question is whether enough people will recognize what they're seeing now in real time and refuse to accept it as normal. Because none of this is normal. Not the masked decadence while people are gassed, not the threats of conquest while allies mobilize defensively, not the economic collapse brushed off with insults and racism, not the praise of authoritarian figures while democratic movements are crushed, and certainly not the idea that this is all just politics as usual.